Well, good morning again, everybody. Chaplain Joe back at you here again. We want to continue our series on faith and patience, and we're also continuing what we talked about last week. And what do we do between the space between the promise and the performance? Or what do we do in the space between when God gives us a promise, when God tells us something, and then when that thing actually manifests in our life, i.e. the performance of that promise? And last week we talked about what do we do between the space and the performance is we get a word from the Lord and then we speak what God has said. And that's very important. We only speak what God has said and not what we're saying and not what we come up with. Because over the years I've seen a lot of Christians, they want to just name it and claim it and speak it into existence, and they're speaking something that God may not have said. It doesn't work like that. We have to speak what God said. And in the spirit of that, we're going to continue the story of Elijah when God gave him a word to speak to King Ahab, telling him it was going to rain. So what do we do in between the space between the promise and the performance? Because if you read 1 Kings chapter 17, starting at verse 1, God told Elijah that he's going to send the rain. Unfortunately, God didn't send the rain until verse 45. Okay, so there was a long space in between the promise of what God said and when it actually happened. So what are some of the things that we can do between the space between the promise and the performance? So some people may say the space in the in-between. Well, one of the things that we can do is Elijah remained consistent. Okay, he was a prophet and he continued to operate in his character and his calling. And this is when I tell people, do what you know to do and operate in your godly character as God continues to mold you and shape you and make you into his image. Continue to do what you know to do until it happens, okay? Continue to operate in holiness. Continue to operate in your godly character. The second thing is Elijah worshiped God. Now this is very key because there's the Bible verse that says, "Oh, magnify the Lord with me." And when we magnify the Lord, the way that we do it is we worship the Lord and spend time and get into his presence via praise and worship. And what happens is God becomes bigger in our sight or our perspective of him. Because God is omnipresent. You can't make omnipresence bigger. But what you can do is make God bigger to you in your perspective of him. So when we praise and worship God, God becomes bigger than our problems. So praising and worshiping God is very important. And then lastly, I'm going to talk about more things we can do next week. He also sowed a seed. In this case, he sowed a seed. In this case, the seed was water in the midst of a 3-year drought. Now this is very important. You sow a seed. Now, a lot of people say, yeah, you sow a seed in the area you have a need, and I agree with that to a point because you do reap what you sow. However, though, do not sow a lot of money, especially money, because a lot of TV preachers do this to you. You know, they say, hey, if you have a need, sow some money, and God will basically bring you out of your need. Saints, that's not necessarily how it works. Give according to the way God is telling you to give. Give because the Holy Spirit is telling you to give. Don't give just because you have a need. Because if that's the case, there's no guarantee you're never going to get out of it. Don't get caught up in that scam. So sow a seed, but sow a seed the way that the Lord is leading you to do or telling you to do, not because you're being manipulated by preachers. I'm going to stop there because I got a lot more things we can do between the space between the promise and the performance. But for now until then, God bless. See you next time.